So I dús tá Sinn Féin agus I seachta Louise or Reilly.
Last Corla, and I just want to take a moment to also offer my congratulations to Minister McEntee, to her husband, on the wonderful news of the arrival of their baby boy this morning. As my grandmother used to say, a baby brings their own luck, and I wish the Minister and her husband and their new baby all of the luck in the world. And I would remind the Taoiseach that the Minister herself said before she left that the measures put in place are a stick and plaster, so we do have work to do, but this is a very good day and a very historic day indeed, as the first full minister in office to give birth, so we wish her all the very, very best. Taoiseach, today the Government will set out the plan for reopening in the coming months. It's a very positive day, and we know that this day is taking place due to the dedication of the public and indeed our frontline health workers who never wavered in the fight against this virus. The positivity of easing restrictions and reopening our economy also brings with it some worry for businesses and for workers. I am really happy that tens of thousands of workers, many of whom haven't seen a day's work for over a year, will be able to return to their workplaces in the coming weeks and months. However, we know that public health advice means that many others will not be able to do so, and I'm thinking about workers in aviation, workers in tourism-dependent industries, travel agents, and many of those who just won't be able to find work in their partially reopened industries, that they will continue to be out of work through no fault of their own, and those workers, Taoiseach, must be supported. And whilst the Government has continuously said there will be no cliff edge when it comes to income supports, it's really unfair that you would not put some shape on what that means and give those words some meaning for the workers and for the business owners. The Taoiseach yesterday refused to give concrete assurances to workers and businesses who may be out of work beyond June due to COVID-19. The very least they deserve is certainty that supports on which they depend won't be cut while public health restrictions remain in place. Workers and businesses in sectors that haven't reopened and may not reopen as quickly as others need to know that they're not facing cuts or reductions of any sort come July. And it's only fair that for so long as people can't go to work or businesses can't reopen due to public health advice, that those workers, businesses and their families will retain the full support afforded to them. So I would urge you to set that out, please, Taoiseach. Businesses too need a lifeline. Chambers Ireland have set out their view today, and they've said that businesses must be given certainty on how long the wage supports, grant aid waivers and debt warehousing will be available. So too have the ICTU, restaurateurs, the vintners, retailers and many more. They are looking for as much certainty as can be given, and indeed I share their view. In respect to the wage subsidy scheme, I believe it's incumbent on the Government to articulate a firm commitment to maintaining supports until such time as businesses are not only reopened but properly established, up and running and fully trading. In relation to the COVID restriction support scheme, many businesses who have been closed for months now fear that if they are allowed to reopen and trade, their trade could bring them just over the threshold to qualify, but they'd still be well out of pocket compared to what we would refer to as normal times. They're looking for the qualification point of the CRSS to be flexible in light of this, and Taoiseach, I would urge you to support that. Sinn Féin supports that. The simple fact of the matter is that easing up the restrictions and getting business back up and running will not turn the clock back to March 2020. In the past 14 months, SMEs and family-run businesses have warehoused over €1 billion worth of tax debt with the revenue. Many have commercial rent arrears and others have bank debt. These are all significant issues, Taoiseach, and they all require solutions, because unless they're addressed, many businesses will not survive and thousands of jobs could potentially be lost. We can't allow that to happen. So can I ask you please to set out that the PUP and the wage subsidy scheme will remain in place for the length of time that public health restrictions are in place? Will the qualifying restrictions for the CRSS be examined? And will a flexible arrangement be agreed with revenue regarding the continued warehousing of tax debt for SMEs?
Thanks very much, Deputy, and thank you, Lascan Corla. And I'd just like to join with you by offering my sincere and heartfelt congratulations to Helen McEntee, who was delivered of a baby boy last night, and also to her husband, Paul Hickey. They've made history. This is the first time that a serving member of government in Ireland has given birth. And when it comes to equality and diversity, it's often said that people need to see it before they know they can be it. And I hope that young women and girls will see today that in Ireland you can hold high office, take maternity leave and raise a family and be supported to do so. Of course, we have more work to do in this area, but it is a positive day, and history is being made today by the McEntee and Hickey family. Just to say in relation to COVID, the process is as follows. Yesterday, NEFID met, issued a letter of advice to the government. Last night, the COVID subcommittee met, and we developed a proposal late last night, which will be put to Cabinet this afternoon. Should the Cabinet agree to that proposal, the Taoiseach will make a full announcement around 6 p.m. This evening. I think it is a day of hope for Ireland. All things going to plan over the course of May, June and July. Most businesses will reopen. Hundreds of thousands of people currently on the pandemic unemployment payment will be able to return to work, and we'll see a lot of our personal freedoms restored. In May alone, we could see as many as 15,000 businesses reopen and as many as 200,000 people being offered their jobs back. And I want to join with Deputy Reilly in thanking the Irish people for their resilience, their cooperation and their adherence to the regulations and restrictions. I know it hasn't been easy, but it has made a big difference and has put us in a much better place than many of our peer countries. And I particularly want to thank the HSE and the staff of our Public Health Service. I think one of the untold stories of this pandemic is how well our health service performed. Our health service often gets a lot of bad press, sometimes deservedly. But this is a health service that really stood up to the challenge, in my view. We never ran out of ICU capacity, we never ran out of beds, never ran out of oxygen or ventilators, are able to do same-day tests with next-day results for a virus that didn't exist almost a year or so ago. We've seen an extraordinary performance from our health service in that regard. And at least when it comes to vaccines, once they get into the country, in 95% of cases, they're administered to people within a week, and keeping that's going to be difficult, but that's what we intend to do. In relation to the financial supports, for example, the pandemic unemployment payments, the wage subsidy scheme, the weekly CRIS payment and the rates holiday, I can confirm that they will remain in place until the end of June. And by the end of May, we'll set out a clear plan for people and for businesses as to what's going to happen from July onwards. I fully appreciate, and the government fully appreciates, that there are certain sectors that are going to need additional and ongoing financial support because of the difficulties that they will face in reopening and recovering. And they include sectors like hospitality, like the tourism industry, like aviation, and also the events and arts sectors. They will need ongoing financial support for quite some time, in my view, and we'll set out a plan to do that before the end of May. But the current and existing financial supports will stay in place as they are, at least until the end of June. I do think that when the restrictions are eased, we're going to see a bounce in consumer spending. There's a lot of pent-up demand, there's a lot of money in savings accounts, and we will see a bounce in consumer spending. But we need to make sure that's not a dead cat bounce. The last thing we want to see is a boom in consumer spending, it falling off in a few months' time, and at that same time we then withdraw the financial supports that people and businesses need. That would be a mistake, and we need to get this right. But finally, I would just say, and we need to be honest about this in this House, this is all borrowed money. This is not money that we generated ourselves through our labour or through our taxes. This is money borrowed from banks, from bondholders, with the help of the ECB. It will have to be refinanced, and we need to be honest about that.
O'Reilly.
Tánaiste, you said most businesses will open. Most businesses will, some won't. Most workers who were in work in March 2020 will go back to work. That's fair enough. Some of them won't. And those workers are now absolutely terrified of July the 1st because they don't know what is coming. If they had any savings, and bearing in mind many of these workers were doing the kind of work as facilitated by your government, that meant that they would not be in a position to have savings. But if they had savings, those savings are now gone. They are depleted. And Tánaiste, I would urge you, when you are formulating your plan, that you would engage directly with the representatives of workers and with the representatives of industry, not in big forums, but in a one-to-one way, so that you can hear directly what supports it is that they need. And I would urge you to consider the flexibility around the CRSS scheme, because that is absolutely a lifeline now for workers and for businesses to keep them going. They need that level of certainty. I welcome that there's going to be a plan in May. Of course I do. But as we stand here this morning, Taoiseach, can you set out a period of engagement and real and meaningful engagement with these people, and specifically with the workers' representatives?
Thanks very much, Deputy. I can give you the assurance that I'll do exactly that. I'll be speaking to the business organisations this evening after the Cabinet meeting, and I'll be meeting in small group format, as I often do, with the LEAF, which is the unions and the employers as well. And we'll be doing that, I think, next week, in fact. So there will be detailed engagement with unions and employers, and that's going to happen over the next couple of days. The CRSS scheme, which is a weekly grant for businesses that are closed, that remains in place until businesses reopen, and also remains in place if a business is trading at significantly reduced capacity. So, for example, many of those restaurants and pubs that might be able to open outdoors in June will still be able to avail of the CRIS payment, because their trading will be so restricted by the rules that are going to be in place. And like Mr Donoghue always says, and the Taoiseach always says, there'll be no cliff edge at the end of June. There'll be no rapid withdrawal of financial supports. We know they need to continue, and we know that our economy has a better chance of bouncing back if they continue. But we also need to be honest with people too. This is borrowed money from the ECB, from banks, from bondholders, from people some people wanted to burn not too long ago. Thankfully, we were able to borrow that money, but it does have to be refinanced.
Thank you.